All right. I think we've probably got most of the people in. We might see some stragglers still coming in, but I think we're probably good to start. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for taking time on your lunch to join us here for the Meet the Dare UK Driver Projects public event. So this is just an opportunity really to meet the projects and the teams and see what they're up to. If I can maybe start sharing my screen, give me 1 second, and I'll just take us through how we're going to go through the session today. Can I just get an indication? Can you see my screen? All right, I see a thumbs up. Great. Great, thank you. This is the Dare UK event. Just a quick one of sort of how we're going to go through today. I'll just sort of be, I guess, the guide through the meeting for today. We'll start with, brief introduction to the Dare UK program. We won't spend too long just to give you an overview and a flavor of what the program's about. We'll then roll straight into presentations from
You've dissipated onto mute, Fergus, and your screen sharing has stopped. There was a hiccup, I think, in the network. Good start, eh?
Right, strong start. Am I back?
We can hear you again now.
All right, apologies. I got kicked off momentarily. Let me reshare my screen.
Yeah, I got the.
Am I back?
Yeah, you got this.
Yeah, got it.
All right.
But you'll share. Yeah, that's it.
That's perfect.
Right. Sorry, everybody. Okay, a little bit of housekeeping and meeting etiquette here. Just please keep the mics muted, unless invited to ask a question. You can post questions in the chat as we go. Obviously, there will be a Q&A session at the end where we'll answer any questions, but feel free to use the chat. You can also raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question out loud. Just to ensure that all communications, of course, are respectful. I think that goes without saying, and that the focus really here is on the driver projects and the work that they're doing. And so let's focus the discussion on that. The presentations will be recorded, and both the slides and the recording of the presentations will be shared, probably then published on the Dare UK website as well. Great. I think then I'll quickly try to get us through just an overview of the program. I won't spend too long on this. So the Dare UK program is really established, and sort of the context for establishing this program is that research on sensitive data is done and takes place in secure environments. These are known as trusted research environments, and some research requires data that sits in more than one secure environment, right? And a good example of this, of sort of when this was needed, was during the COVID pandemic, and of course the UK's response to that is a good example of this. And showing the importance and the value of being able to perform research sort of at pace, at speed, that links different types of data in a way that's secure, trustworthy, and of course protects privacy and confidentiality. So when we talk about the national capability, that's what we're referring to within the Dare UK program, or what the program is focused on pushing forward together with all the people that have been doing great work in this space already, right? Some of those people are part of the driver projects, of course. I should say that the Dare UK program is funded through UKRI, so UK Research and Innovation, which is the UK's biggest public funder of research and innovation. And the program is overseen, has joint oversight in terms of its delivery from Administrative Data Research UK, also known as ADR UK, and Health Data Research UK, also known as HDR UK. So the program is a pan-UKRI program. So we look across all the research data and data domains of UKRI, very much focused here on sensitive data and the linkage of data, sensitive data across these domains. I think the key thing here is that these 5 funded driver projects that we're going to sort of hear from now, which is really the focus of this call, they're all short, focused projects that are exploratory. They're testing specific capabilities that will contribute to the gradual establishment of this national capability, this national infrastructure for sensitive data for research in the public benefit. So that's really important to stress here. We're early on in the journey as DARE UK, and these projects, along with other projects that we funded previously and other work and engagement going on, is all contributing to a gradual sort of establishment of this infrastructure, this capability, this national capability. I think I'm pretty much going to leave it there. I don't want to spend too much more time on this. I think the focus here, as said, is really the projects, understanding what it is that they're trying to do, what they're working on, and hopefully then at the end of the discussion, asking some good questions and how it fits into the overall vision of the program as well. So I'm going to leave it there and basically hand directly over. I'm actually on time, which is great. Hand over directly to Professor Jim Smith, I think, who is going to start with the SACRO project, which, Jim, you could elaborate on the acronym as you go then.
Thank you. Just as ever, struggling to find the share. There we go, share screen. Okay, can anyone just quickly confirm that you've got the right screen on? You've got my slides on screen.
We can't see anything yet, Jim.
Oh, let's try that one then. How about now?
We have presenter view, not audience view.
Okay, I'll be with. Better now?
Bingo.
Okay, thanks so much. So thanks for the introduction. As you just discovered, my name's Jim Smith, and I'm not brilliant at Zoom. So SACRO is about the semi-automatic checking of research outputs. So thanks to Fergus's introduction, I don't need to go through the overall need for balancing confidentiality with the need for doing speedy research. And the general idea of what TREs are. TREs are obviously these very safe environments based on the 5 safe principles developed by Felix Ritchie and other people, which are basically says only bona fide researchers have got access to the data, only projects which have been through a governance committee and are decided to be in the public interest are allowed. There's a safe setting, so there's the TRE infrastructure is defined to be safe, and the other projects are dealing with that. The researchers have only got access to anonymized data, and which is relevant to study. And the part which we're particularly addressing is that safe outputs. So there's been a stage where someone has looked at the outputs and confirmed that they don't have any information which could be personally identifiable either of a person or the whole group of people. So just taking a closer look, say inside the dotted line, we've got our standard TRE with a data repository. They extract some pseudonymized data from a particular project. A researcher does their work in an analytic environment using standard tools like R or Python, Stata, things like that, depending on the different disciplines. They'll create some requests for output, which will then go through a manual disclosure checking process before they're allowed to be released to the outside world or not. And SACRO is about addressing the bottleneck, which has been identified by many TREs over the year, and which is highlighted in DARE's report from autumn last year, that human checking process is time consuming. A lot of what they do is highly repetitive, and it works against the very idea of being able to do research at speed. So who are the people involved in this? We're a mix of university researchers with an interest in disclosure control, public health bodies, established TREs with between them decades of experience of running TREs in different sorts of environments, and external collaborators drawn across nations, different continents, and a range of different disciplines. So our aim is to address that bottleneck in output checking, leveraging the experience that we've got. So we've got on board the people who came up with the 5 safe concepts and the idea, people who, so Felix, Lizzie and myself wrote a proof of concept of how we might do some automated checking, which is now in use at Eurostat. We've got researchers who have been looking at the theory of how different kinds of statistical analysis pose risks of disclosure control. As I said, we've got experience of running TREs in different disciplines, and also thanks to DARE funding in the previous round of projects, we've got quite a bit of experience of analysing the disclosure risk of when people want to use machine learning to do their analysis instead of statistical tools. Apologies for the acronym there. And people with PIE, existing stakeholder and public engagement experience. And our concept is very much that we have to involve all those external parties in order to produce something which the public have got confidence that what we're doing is supporting output checkers, not supplanting them. There are wider concerns about automated decision-making on people's private data. We're making something which researchers want to use and see a value in using, and that TREs see a value in using. So the idea is we're going to make a comprehensive framework, conceptual framework of theory, bringing together all the latest findings in theory to help TREs choose appropriate disclosure protocols and to specify their risk appetite. And we want to do this in a way that is machine readable and standard so that we can enable the kind of linking up between TREs that Fergus was mentioning. We want to produce tools that can automatically check most outputs, that take into account the different risk appetites of TREs, but also a risk appetite that might vary at the level of data sets or even particular features, and which produces standard structured reports to help, which can be stored to save the auditing process, and user interfaces that help the TRE workflow, and that also help researchers themselves request fewer disclosure outputs in the first place. As I said, we're going to take stakeholders' views embedded throughout. So our 4 technical work packages in the middle of this have just finished a big scoping exercise at the moment using reverse science cafes. And then they're going to go through a series of sprints, each of which will involve TRE input and feedback to co-design the next stage. Providing context for all of that, we've got our PIE work package and a work package all around working with a range of external stakeholders in our steering group. The PII people are about to start a series of workshops, followed by a Delphi exercise to try and produce a really useful statement about what the public concerns are around output checking and how they should be addressed. So just to give you a 2-stage snapshot of what we're going to do, being slightly aware of time. The current situation is that researchers write queries in R or Stata or Python, whatever, which access the data set and just produce a set of files. Typically, there'll be CSV files or images, and they ask the TRE staff to analyze them and make decisions, which is a lengthy manual process. The Sacro concept is that we're going to insert into that the bit inside the dotted box here. So researchers will use their familiar tools, their familiar commands, but just using a different prefix, which means that they will get picked up by some lightweight translation functions which can pick up commands from a range of analytic libraries and put them into what we're calling our Sacro engine, which will do the disclosure control process and automate the things that can be automated before passing the queries through to standard analytic libraries. And we will give back to the researcher both the results of their queries, but also the SDC outputs, so they can find out if they're writing queries that are likely to be disclosive, and they can decide to drop those.
Just a note on time, Jim.
Right, okay, when they're finished, they can call a finalize, which produces a lovely packaged up thing with a nice interface for the TRE staff to help them make rapid decisions so they can see the automated analysis alongside the user's research. Right, I'd stop there in that case. The idea is that we're producing fewer requests and we're providing TRE staff at the right time. Thank you for listening. Apologies for delays with my getting the screen sharing going.
No worries, Jim. I know they're short presentations, I know, so no worries. Thanks for that. I think we'll then move to the next project, which is the SARA project. And I think that's Dr. Arlene Casey.
Yes, that's me. I'll just share my screen. Microsoft PowerPoint share. Button start. We good?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So hello everyone. Yes, I'm going to be talking about SARA, the semi-automated risk assessment, data provenance and clinical free text TREs. So it was great that Jim sort of gave the overview of the 5 safes. So where we're targeting is the risk assessment when releasing data. So that's where our project is focused on. And so this is a really important part of the work that information governance undertake when they're releasing data, because it ensures that data controllers, researchers and the public, that the data that's made available meets the required standards and maintains confidentiality. And with the SARA project, we're addressing 2 areas of risk assessment. The first in data provenance, and the second, a more nuanced part of data provenance about risk assessment and clinical free text. So I'll just say a little bit more about what each of those are. So data provenance is about how a TRE brings data in, processes and links data and makes it available. So it's ensuring that when we build a data cohort, it contains what we expect it to contain, the characteristics of a data set, what we would expect clinically. And then when we link data together, it remains as we expect it. So for example, if we start off with 100 patients, 40% are male, and then we link it to another data set and it suddenly jumps to 50 patients and only 20% are male, that's a warning kind of that something perhaps went wrong. So that's what we kind of call the data provenance side of things. And at each stage of building a cohort, we collect metadata about these processes, and currently it's very manual. So SARA is a proof of concept prototype tool to semi-automate this process. And in doing so, we're going to bring reassurance to the risk assessment process and enable quality assurance and trace of what is done. On the clinical free text side, what I mean by clinical free text is narratives written by medical professions, so like letters, discharge summaries, etc. And we're looking at the privacy risk in these clinical free texts, and by their very nature, free text can contain anything really. And so there's a good agreement on things like direct identifiers, names, dates of births, addresses, that these shouldn't be in there because they directly identify people. But there's less understanding about what we call indirect identifiers. So these are things that increase the risk of somebody being identified. So for example, Mrs. Smith came down from her 4th floor flat, crossed the street, went to the university cafe where her daughter works and was found in a confused state. You would remove Mrs. Smith's name and you would think that's maybe unidentifiable, but actually if you know that data came from Glasgow, that's quite a famous cafe, and suddenly she becomes identifiable. And so it's those indirect risks that we don't have a clear understanding of, and as part of this project we're looking at exploratory work to understand those risks in order to support the risk assessment process. So our goal is to improve and support risk assessment by undertaken by information governance teams and data analysts by creating 2 semi-automated tools to support these 2 areas. So in our approach, we have 3 work streams. The first is our public engagement, so it's understanding public and stakeholder perceptions of appropriate risk levels around data provenance and privacy in clinical free text. So we are in the process of appointing a social research organisation to support this work, and we've decided to take that approach because we think it helps us reach a more representative sample of contributors. The consultation will be in 2 parts, and the design will involve public contributors. So it will be a survey to uncover public views about risk assessment in health data research, and deliberative workshops to explore draft conceptualisations about privacy risk to individuals, specific groups and across society, and our initial proposals for how data should be treated through the semi-automated processes. So much of the deliberation will be focused on scenario-based discussions to draw out different perspectives. For example, how should this data be removed or redacted? The outcomes from these pieces of work will influence the decisions made in the other 2 work packages, and of course all the outcomes will be made publicly available. And so workstream 2 and 3, these These are focused on building the semi-automated tools, with 2 addressing clinical free text and 3 the data provenance. So we're building on existing work. Within data provenance, the researchers in University of Aberdeen have been working on a data provenance tool that's been built in synthetic data. And within the University of Edinburgh, we have been using what's called natural language processing. So that's how we extract information from free text to map out risks and consider risk mitigation strategies in free text. So the focus in both of these work streams is about building interactive dashboards, and we'll use software that's generally available across all of the TREs. And the idea is to allow information governance to audit and undertake risk assessment and quality assurance in clinical free text and in the data provenance workflow. So finally, just, who are we? So I said I was from the University of Edinburgh, and I work for Datalock, who are the Southeast trusted research environment in Scotland. And at the University of Edinburgh, we're more focused on the clinical free text side, whereas at the University of Aberdeen and DASH, which is the Grampian TRE, Catherine Sullivan is leading on the data provenance side. And then we have Stuart Dunbar, who's our communication and engagement manager at Datalock, who's leading on the public engagement and working closely with Elizabeth Ford from University of Sussex. And also involved is the Glasgow Trusted Research Environment and Public Health Scotland, who run our national safe haven in Scotland. So we hope by taking this collaborative and open approach and having everyone involved in the different work streams, that it will ensure a wider representation and creates a better template or potential for these tools to be picked up and used by all of the TREs. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Arlene. Moving swiftly on then. So the next project is the Terrifics. I hope I'm saying that correctly, Carol, and that's Professor Carol Goebel.
Thank you. And hope you okay. Rob, can you see it?
We can see.
I
this.
can. Your audio was a little wobbly, Carol, but I think it's settled down.
Oh, okay. Is my audio now?
Ooh, you're a little jerky, if you'll
Okay.
forgive the expression.
Maybe,
Yeah.
Carol, maybe what we can do is we'll jump to the next, but maybe we'll see if you could maybe rejoin and that your connection will stabilize. I think
Is it okay now?
Ooh,
Yeah.
it's
better.
better now, yes. And
Ooh, but you've frozen.
all right.
Right, so
One of those days.
Oh, better now. Okay, sorry about that. This is building core federation services for a federated network of TREs to enable the 5 safes that Jim mentioned earlier. So this is a collection of trusted research environments, including the SaIL data bank from Wales, the environments and Treehouse trusted research environment from Dundee, and other trusted research environments. We have infrastructure providers, PPIE partners, and analysis tool partners who specialize in how to be able to ask questions across multiple TREs. Because as was introduced by Fergus, we're operating in this 5 safes framework for TREs to provide 5 safe research access to data. We heard about that from our previous 2 speakers, but we also want to be able to allow federated analysis using multiple TREs. And so we have infrastructure, we have tools like DataShield and Bitfont that are both public and commercial tools that allow you to do that, but it's tricky. So how do we standardize the flow of information in order to be able to support federated analysis using multiple trusted research environments to answer your query, but remaining within the 5 safes framework? And in addition, could we develop a mechanism for running federated analytics workflows? So these are computational pipelines that would be able to answer the question that would be independent of any particular technology, so that they would be easily adoptable by trusted research environments. So As you might imagine, therefore, there are many scenarios where you can't get all the data into one TRE. So you have to do the analysis across multiple TREs, which is actually kind of possible at the moment, but very difficult. And the reason is because you have to make all these multiple connections. Every toolkit that supports this kind of analysis has its own unique exchange standards that every trusted research environment has to then adopt and build a bespoke solution in order to be able to support. And then each solution in this complicated web has to be independently tested against the 5 safes, and it has to be validated against PPIE and governance. So that makes it incredibly like spaghetti. Instead, if we could streamline this by using standardized, what we call digital research objects, to be able to exchange between the different services, and these objects would represent the queries and the results and the metadata that enable 5 safes to operate, then you have a much more streamlined approach. So the analytical tools could use these objects, mint these objects, make these objects. The TREs could take on board these objects. They could also adapt them and alter them and then send them back to the analysis tools. And we would therefore be able to have these objects that will carry the right metadata needed to be able to do 5 safes operation across this entire platform. And it will be very transparent and scalable because these objects would hold all the appropriate information. We can do this because we have developed in Europe, through a research infrastructure for life science data called Elixir, an interoperability platform developed around this notion of digital objects. And it's called RO-Crate for historical complicated reasons, but that's what it's called. It basically crates up information into structured packages of content, which is machine actionable metadata, which actually our previous speaker mentioned the notion of metadata and being able to action on and interpret by automated analysis the metadata. But it uses well understood off-the-shelf technologies widely used in industry, and also enables you to describe things in a very diverse way so that you can cope with multiple different kinds of content. And we can use this, and we have used this in a whole range of European projects to exchange queries and data and computational analysis and provenance logs actually as well. So we're now bringing this to the HDR environment and to DARE and to the trusted research environments. So in a nutshell, our federated analysis tools will make a query, which is the user request, the query to run on the TRE. I'm aware my internet's unstable. The metadata for the data set. It passes this to the TREs. These TREs have within them a whole layer of submission protocols that do analysis, access checking. We have an entire controlled zone, which enables you to control exactly what containers and workflows can actually be executed within the TRE. And on the way out again, we have disclosure control, of course, in order to be able to control what goes out of the TREs. And in fact, we're also bringing infrastructure from Europe again on a workflow environment that will allow you to execute the question, the query in the TRE that has been pre-approved. We then, if that submission, that all process completes, we have then, after disclosure control, the research objects come back out and they go back to the tools with the results and the representation of the provenance, which we just also heard about. We can then also deposit these objects into registries like the data use registry. We can also share the computational pipelines that we may have put into the TREs in order to answer the questions through well understood and open registries to create a transparency layer. So that's the approach. Although this is a technical sprint, we of course have PPIE at the very heart of it, and we operate as one team, one mission. Our meetings are all chaired by the PPI chair. So Gillian Begg chairs all of our meetings, and we have a whole series of workshops and public workshops, video explaining and so on, as one would expect. But importantly, they're part of the development team. So they are actually attending all of our technical sprints, all of our technical meetings, and putting feedback and content into our designs. We can build on this, we can do this sprint because we're building on existing services and tools and frameworks that were developed in the previous DARE sprints. We have infrastructure that already exists, and we're bringing infrastructure from our European projects into this platform, and we have all the federated analytics platforms as well. So we can really get going on this because we have all this infrastructure already in place and we've already piloted it. How we're doing it, we're actually doing it through user scenario-driven implementation. So we're actually designing a whole series of different scenarios of how these objects move around our query environments, our federated analysis tool environments, and the TREs. And we have to ask questions about how do we organize our RO-Crate objects? How do we do workflow approval? How do we adapt all of the different platforms that already exist, because we have already existing legacy platforms. So we want to be able to make it very straightforward for this to be widely adopted by TREs and tool providers that already exist. So what are the adaptations needed? What are the agreements on the processes between the TREs, and what is the user and project validation? And we can see easily how we can relate to all the other projects you'll hear, because we are developing a sort of general digital object environment which fits with the TRE blueprint we're about to hear from Satra, but also we can provide metadata for the SACRO automated checking, and also for the data provenance. And in Teleport later on that we'll hear about, Teleport we can have as a one of our endpoints for our platform. If we succeed, which we will, because it's going to, we're absolutely sure that this will work because we've already demonstrated it. We have the opportunity to be able to see how would we roll it out across other trusted environments in HDR UK. But in particular, because we have our mixture of partners, we have extremely good links into other countries, notably through the SAIL platform based in Swansea. We have implementations of that infrastructure, SERP infrastructure in Australia and Canada. And the whole approach that we're bringing in from Elixir around the digital objects and the computational workflows also gives us channel to be able to develop outreach into those environments and platforms that are being developed at the moment. And indeed, we are already positioning ourselves into big European projects. So in conclusion, this is our concluding slide. This is what we're going to succeed in doing. Standardize the stream and streamline the flow of information using 5 SAFe RO-Crates, and make it readily adoptable for existing and future tools. So thank you. And I'm sorry about my unstable internet.
No worries. Thank you very much, Carol. I guess we can blame me for not keeping you on time there.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I think let's move to the next one then. Thanks, Carol. And the next is Teleport. So that's Professor Simon Thompson.
Okay, so DARE Teleport is about creating a federated pool of data instead of doing federated analytics as such. And the proposal, if we move forward on the slide, is to is to interconnect 2 major TREs, the major TRE of Scotland and from Wales, to create a population size of about 9 million people, to kind of enable a scale of data science that is hard to achieve today. The way that we're going to achieve this is that we're going to create a pop-up TRE, which is an ephemeral TRE, which is there specifically to support individual projects. It will have all the usual things that TREs would have, like data analysis and data loading and data management and so on and so forth. But the data in it will be virtual, and the data will stay in the host TRE organizations. But the user experience will be a Polystore database, so to give a single database experience to the end user. And the fact that the data is virtual will be transparent, and the user won't see this in their experience. To maintain and join up in the normal way that data science would happen today if it was all the data in one TRE. To accommodate the existing and well-established governance models, the command and control of this pop-up TRE will be delegated to the host TREs where the originating data is held. All the data is then combined, and there's a joint release mechanism to allow the data to come out. So it's giving a much more normal TRE experience by joining up existing TREs into this virtual TRE for the purpose of a project. The architecture, if you like, is that the pop-up TRE will be interconnected. There will be a notion of a shared identity across the TREs. There's a notion of a shared project. The GA4J passport is probably a good candidate here for sort of allowing that interoperability between the TREs. But we will create a policy-based framework that will be used to enable permissions and access models across the existing TREs. And this will allow for this sort of unified experience by plugging into the side of existing TREs. The concept is very much about information governance more than it is about the technology as such. And it's a little bit like the embassy model in the sense that the user experience will be subject to all of the rules of engagement of existing TREs. So in other words, the user has to be approved by the first TRE and then the second TRE, and whatever requirements that the user has to fulfill has to still be fulfilled in order to enter the pop-up TRE. Inside the pop-up TRE, you can perform the analysis, and then when you want your data releasing, again, whatever, like in this example, whatever small number suppression or whatever the output checking or governance controls are in place, you still have to fulfill all of the existing governance framework structures of the host contributing TREs. So this is really about augmenting a TRE to become joined together to become a virtual TRE without throwing the baby out with the bathwater in many respects. And therefore, how do we slowly change what have effectively been very, very long established governance models that have proven themselves, they've been battle proven over time to be very robust. And obviously we don't want to undo that. We just want to bend them very slightly. PPIE is very important. Both Scotland and Wales have had PPIE for very long times. Sales has dedicated staff and dedicated consumer panel, as it calls it, for over 10 years now. And again, Research Data Scotland is consolidating the many PPIE activities across Scotland. We do plan to hire, and the advert's just going out now, a layperson, a member of the public, to join the project team. It's going to be a paid position. It's going to be a full-time position in order to kind of make sure that we again, like Carol said, participate in all the design and feedback on the things that we're trying to do. Both of them are big national TREs of Scotland and Wales, have been co-designed with public opinion from their onset, and therefore it's obvious then as we augment these TREs, we must do it with full public consultation so that we make sure that we don't do the wrong thing. That's all I got. I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Thanks, Simon. And for making up a bit of time there, much appreciated. We'll move into the final project, which is the SARTRA project, and that's Dr. Christian Cole.
Hi,
We can see. Oh, Simon, are you standing in?
Yeah, I'm standing in. Unfortunately, Chris is enjoying the sunshine, but in another conference, fortunately, so I'm standing in.
Sure.
So hi, everyone. I'm talking to you today about this consortium work and the standardized architecture for trusted research environments. And I'm based in Dundee at the Health Informatics Centre. So I'll start with saying, what is the problem we're dealing with in this project? Well, the biggest problem is that there are a large number of TOEs and TOE implementations in the UK and actually internationally. We're talking about probably hundreds. These TOEs run on a variety of platforms, some in the public cloud, some on private clouds, some on standard servers in the institution somewhere. These TOEs are pretty much developed independently. Some of them are open source, some of them are commercially developed. But the key common factor is they're pretty much all independently run, developed, and organized. I've listed a few example production TOEs at the general national level here, ranging from the Office of National Statistics, NHS England, Public Health Scotland, and so on. As well as the large number of implementations, there's a large range of governance frameworks as used for these TOEs. So even within the UK, we've got the 4 nations. Every nation have its own sort of general regulatory frameworks, and that's just at the sort of level of England, Ireland, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. In addition to those, every TOE probably has its own level of governance as well. That's a problem for researchers who want to access the data in the TOE, but it's also a problem for, say, you, the public. But if you want to understand how your data is being used in a TOE, you're going to have to dig through all these sort of separate governance regulatory frameworks to understand. And then adding to all this, and to those 2 problems, is that TOEs are the future of sensitive health data in the UK. There have been several sort of high-profile reports released in the past year or so. You can follow those links later when you look at the slides. But essentially, they've concluded that the way that sensitive data should be handled in the UK is in a trusted research environment. And what we don't want to do is to just increase the number of trusted research environments, make it more complicated for researchers to access data, make it more complicated for people, you, the public, to understand how TOEs work, governed, and how their data is being used. We're not going to solve all the problems in this project, but we're going to make a good start. So this is our core team. There's a lot more people who aren't on there. One of the things you can hopefully see is that over a third of our members are nominally involved in public and stakeholder engagement. The reason for that is we're looking to define a standard for TOEs in the UK. In order for a standard to be successful, the key thing is it has to have community support. And by community support, I mean support from all stakeholders. So that includes research, the people who operate and develop TOEs, people who pay for and commission TOEs at the local and national level, people who use TOEs, and people whose data is in the TOE. So, as an example, if your health data is in TOE, you have a right to understand how your data is being used. And yeah, in order for this standard to be successful, we need to be communicating with you. And I don't nominally just roughly a third of people are working on public stakeholder engagement. In practice, almost everyone is, simply because in order to build a standard, everyone, whether they're working on the technical side or the governance side or whatever, everyone has to understand exactly what's needed. We've got contributors from, say, all over the UK with experience working in, say, local government, the NHS, and also in industry. We've previously worked on several their projects. We've built a network of contacts through that. And importantly, we've also got some production TOEs that we can use to validate the work that we're doing as part of the standard. So it's one thing to sort of gather information for the community about what needs to go into standard and make it, but equally important is to say, does that standard work? So these are kind of our 3 key aims. The first is to combine the expertise we have from running our TOEs with the network of contacts we've built up amongst other stakeholders, including with the public, to come up with a standard for what a TOE what a sort of standard TOE should encompass. And ideally, we'd like to have sufficient community engagement to say that eventually, in a few years' time, every TOE can say comply with the standard. That will make it easier for everyone to use a TOE in order to understand. We want to basically validate that this standard works by implementing it ourselves. So we've got 2 open source TOEs that we already work on. We're committed as part of this project to make sure they comply with the specification. And then we want to make sure there's a long-term governance framework for this standard. So we want to ensure this standard lasts for years, way beyond any single funding round. And that the best way to do that is to have a vendor-independent, community-driven governance organization that manages it. This is roughly the sort of a flowchart of where we're going. As you can see, there's kind of like in the middle, just sort of 5 main packages of work. And as you can see, it's very much an iterative process. We start with looking at existing TOEs, coming up with a proposal in conjunction with the community, try implementing implementing them, at the same time talking with everyone, the stakeholders and the public, about get some feedback on whether it's practical, whether it covers all your sort of concerns potentially about TOEs. Sorry. And in terms of our actual outputs, throughout the project, we're going to be providing some sort of information just on what TOEs are, how they work, and how the standard is going to evolve. That should be accessible to everyone. Around about the middle of the project, we'll be coming up with at least a draft specification of what we think a TOE is and could encompass. Towards the end of the project, we'll be, as I mentioned, we'll be developing our open source TOEs to comply with that standard. And by the end of the project, we will also have at least a proposal for how the standard should be governed long term. So finally, just some of our sort of current outreach activities. We've already started running some public sessions to gain feedback. We've sent out some surveys. We've got some more workshops actually this week and towards the end of the year, so end of the month. We're going to start producing, say, public outreach material in the near future. We're taking a completely open development process in our project. So we've got a Medium blog where we can be giving, say, updates of how the project's going. But for anyone who's with a technical interest, we're going to do as much as possible in an open GitHub repository. So that includes developing specification, discussions about open source implementations, and as far as possible, just general discussions. So thanks for listening. And if you're interested in finding out more, you'll obviously see the links to our blog and GitHub, and you're also welcome to email us on that address.
Fantastic. Thanks, Simon. So we're slightly over time, but doing not too badly, I think. Maybe a couple things to add here. I mean, the contact details, of course, the slides will be shared with everyone on this call, and the contact details for each of the projects, sort of the key contact will go onto our website as well. So you can all go look at the website for a bit more detail, and if you want to get in touch, you can get in touch there as well. It's not up yet, but it will be. Thank you all very much for joining us over your lunch. Much appreciated. Thank you very much to the driver projects for presenting your work, and we're very excited to see where it goes and how we take it forward. Thanks all for joining. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.